She was just there, her leash curled by the back door, her favorite chew toy still damp with slobber lying next to the porch swing. I had only stepped away for an hour, but now Daisy, my daughter Ava's service puppy, was gone. That golden retriever was more than a pet. She was hope wrapped in fur. And in that moment, staring at the empty backyard, I felt the air get knocked out of my chest. You never expect a nightmare to unfold in the middle of a sunny spring afternoon. But as I scanned our yard in Meadowstone Grove, dread began to crawl up my spine like a slow, icy wind. I called her name softly at first, still half expecting to see that clumsy little tail wagging from behind the garden beds. Daisy! Come on, girl! No rustle, no bark, just silence, and the low hum of neighborhood sprinklers in the distance. Panic sharpened my voice. Daisy! I ran to the fence line, checked every corner of the yard, under the deck, behind the shed. Nothing. The gate was latched. No sign of digging. It didn't make sense. 6 months ago, we'd moved to Meadowstone Grove for its quiet streets, its top-rated schools, and the accessibility features Ava needed. My daughter was 12 years old and lived with cerebral palsy, a condition that made everyday movement a challenge and clear speech an uphill battle. But Ava wasn't just physically fragile. She carried a wound much deeper. 2 years earlier, we had lost her father. Since then, it was as though part of her had dimmed. Her laughter had become rare, her smiles cautious, like she was afraid they'd vanish. Therapy had been a slow climb. Medication offered minimal lift. But Daisy, that puppy had reached Ava in a way nothing else had. From the moment they met, Daisy seemed to understand Ava's unspoken language, the slight movements of her hand, the slurred calls of her name. Within days, Ava began speaking more, sitting up straighter, trying harder in her physical therapy just to play fetch. That dog didn't just fill a void, she stitched it closed. Now she was missing, and my mind spiraled with scenarios, none of them good. I rushed through the neighborhood, down the sidewalks lined with tulips and trimmed hedges, calling for her with rising desperation. A few neighbors were out enjoying the warmth, pushing strollers or sipping lemonade, but no one had seen a golden retriever puppy running loose. No, sorry, one woman replied with a polite frown, but I'll keep an eye out. I thanked her and kept moving, dread ballooning in my chest. Ava would be home in under an hour. I couldn't tell her this. I couldn't face those wide eyes, filled with trust, and shatter them with uncertainty. By the time I reached the small community park, my voice was hoarse. I circled the playground, checked behind the tennis courts, scanned the empty picnic areas. No collar jingling, no bounding pup with muddy paws, just the quiet chirping of birds and the breeze rustling the leaves. That's when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number immediately, but the name that flashed on the screen made me pause. Noah Kim. He lived 3 doors down, the tech-savvy neighbor with a spotless lawn and a love for model airplanes. He was calm, measured, rarely called unless it mattered. I answered with a tight voice. Hello? Jenna, he said, and something in his tone stopped me cold. I think you need to come over, right away. My heart skipped. Is it Daisy? Did you see her? Is she okay? There was a pause. Just come, and maybe don't bring Ava. The unease that had been gnawing at my stomach suddenly turned into something darker. I hung up and jogged toward his house, my thoughts a chaotic swirl of worry, fear, and the primal instinct to protect. Something was wrong. I could feel it deep in my bones. Whatever Noah was about to show me, it wouldn't be good, but I had no idea just how bad it would be. When I entered his home, the air felt unnaturally still. Noah met me at the doorway, his face unusually pale, eyes tight with something between pity and fury. Come in, he said. This is hard. He led me into his office and gestured toward the desk. I sank into the chair, hands trembling in my lap. He took a deep breath before turning the monitor toward me. Then he clicked play. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. My mind tried to reject it, to explain it away, to protect me from the truth that was unspooling before my eyes. But it was undeniable. The person walking through my side gate wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a thief or a kid playing a prank. It was Sylvia Pratt, our HOA president. The same woman who had given me a hard time since the day we moved in. She strolled into my backyard like she belonged there, looked around as if checking to make sure no one was watching, then whistled softly. Daisy came trotting over, her tail wagging. She trusted people. That was her nature. Sylvia reached out, clipped on a leash, and calmly led her out. I couldn't speak. My breath caught in my throat, rage and confusion battling for dominance. Sylvia hadn't just trespassed, she had taken Ava's service dog. I leaned closer to the screen, disbelief hardening into a growing horror. Noah clicked to another clip. I knew the location instantly. The community pool area, closed for cleaning on Mondays. Sylvia approached the gate, unlocked it with a master key, and walked inside, Daisy still trotting beside her, unaware of what was coming. What happened next? I will never forget. Sylvia unclipped the leash, then scanned her surroundings. And then, without hesitation, she grabbed Daisy and dragged her to the deep end of the pool. I couldn't breathe. My fingers clutched the edge of the desk as Sylvia forced that innocent creature underwater. Daisy struggled, panicked, tried to escape. But Sylvia held her down. And eventually, she stopped struggling. I screamed. My vision blurred. The sound that tore from me wasn't human. It was grief, rage, helplessness fused into one terrible cry. Noah tried to say something, but I barely heard him. The image of Daisy's lifeless body haunted every corner of my mind. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. How could someone do this? Why would anyone do this? But deep inside, I already knew. This wasn't random. It was personal. Sylvia had hated me from the beginning. She had made no secret of her objections to the ramp I installed, to Daisy's presence, to the special accommodations I had legally fought to have for Ava. Every HOA notice, every veiled insult, every dismissive look, they all led to this. But it went even deeper than neighborhood disputes. Sylvia Pratt was the wife of Charles Pratt, board member of Dermalux, the very company I had exposed last year in one of the most public animal cruelty cases in the country. I had revealed their secret animal testing labs, torn through their facade of cruelty-free branding, and won a case that cost them millions and nearly destroyed their reputation. My face had been on the news, my name in every article. And now that case had come back to haunt me, not through legal retaliation, but through the calculated, vicious act of killing my daughter's only source of comfort. The devastation was overwhelming. But something else took root inside me. Something sharp, focused, and immovable. I was going to make sure Sylvia paid for what she did. Not just with shame, not just with public scorn, but with the full weight of the law. Because what she didn't realize was that this time she hadn't targeted a nameless victim. She had gone after the daughter of Jenna Maddox, an attorney who had taken on some of the most powerful corporations in the country. And I wasn't going to rest until justice was served. The following day felt like a blur, a violent whirlwind of emotions, legal steps, and a grief so heavy it clung to my chest like wet cement. I could barely function, but I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Ava needed me. After I told her, after I knelt beside her and gently explained that Daisy wouldn't be coming home, her body crumpled like a discarded sheet. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She just folded into herself and let out a soft, trembling sob that didn't stop for hours. That silence, her stillness, was so much worse than any tantrum. My daughter had known loss before, had buried a father. But this was betrayal. The one creature she had trusted without hesitation was gone, stolen, murdered. And Ava couldn't understand why anyone would do such a thing. "She was a good girl, Mama," she whispered over and over, stroking the empty space where Daisy used to sleep. "She never did anything wrong." I held her tight, brushing her hair with my fingers, trying not to break in front of her. The questions were relentless. Why? Who would do this? Was it an accident? Did Daisy suffer? I couldn't lie, but I couldn't tell her the whole truth either. Not yet. Not until I had more answers, more clarity, and a solid plan to hold Sylvia accountable. Because that woman, who had waved politely at our block parties, who had handed out community newsletters like some benevolent queen, had knowingly, willingly taken a service dog from a disabled child and ended her life without hesitation. For what? Pride, vengeance, ego? None of it mattered. What mattered now was justice, and I would deliver it. Within 24 hours of the footage being handed over to law enforcement, Police Chief Mel Rosario arrived at my home in person to gather an official statement. A tall man with a weathered face and eyes that had clearly seen more than they cared to, he watched the footage in grim silence. His jaw tightened, his brow furrowed. When the final frame froze on Sylvia's figure walking away from the pool, he took a deep breath and turned to me. "This is clear premeditation," he said. "We're talking felony animal cruelty, unlawful trespassing, and because Daisy was a service dog, potential charges related to interfering with disability accommodations. There's no walking this back." I nodded once, my voice steady as I said, "Press every charge. I'll be pursuing civil litigation as well. She didn't just harm an animal, she harmed my child. And I will make sure the courts understand that." Rosario gave me a respectful nod. "Understood. But let us handle the criminal side. Let the law take its course." The next day, squad cars pulled up to Sylvia's sprawling colonial home. Neighbors emerged from their porches like prairie dogs, wide-eyed and whispering. They watched as officers entered her home with a search warrant and emerged later with bags of evidence, including Daisy's collar and a set of shoes matching those worn in the footage. Sylvia's reaction? Predictable. She claimed Daisy was running wild, threatening her rose bushes, and that anything that happened afterward was an unfortunate accident. Her words dripped with smugness, dismissing the entire incident as beneath her. "If the dog drowned, that's not on me," she had the audacity to say. Perhaps the Maddox family should worry more about controlling their animals than harassing respectable community leaders. Respectable. That word burned in my ears like acid. The community response was swift and split. Some neighbors recoiled in horror, stunned that the same woman who chaired every HOA meeting with a practiced smile could be capable of such cruelty. Others were skeptical. "Sylvia, she's done so much for the neighborhood," they'd say. "Are we sure this isn't just some misunderstanding?" And then there were those who owed her favors, people she had protected, promoted or gifted with minor power, and they rallied behind her defensively. But the tide was turning. People were beginning to whisper about past incidents, about a missing cat, a poisoned bird feeder, things that had never quite made sense, until now. That night, Dr. Ben Forrester, vice president of the HOA and a respected local veterinarian, showed up at our doorstep. In his arms, he carried a plush golden retriever toy and a handwritten card addressed to Ava. "She may not understand everything that's happened," he said gently, "but I wanted her to have something to hold on to." His voice cracked as he added, "Many of us on the board had no idea how bad things had gotten. Sylvia, she's had too much power for too long. But this is indefensible. I looked him in the eyes, searching for sincerity, and I found it. What happens now? I asked. He inhaled sharply. I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night. Everyone will be there. And I think you'll want to speak. The following evening, the Meadowstone Grove Community Centre overflowed. Residents who had never attended a single HOA meeting were suddenly packed shoulder to shoulder, voices hushed, eyes expectant. Some were there out of outrage, others out of loyalty, still others out of morbid curiosity. Sylvia arrived fashionably late, wearing a pale pink pantsuit and a smug expression, flanked by her high-powered defense attorney and her husband Charles, who avoided eye contact with everyone. The room buzzed with tension. When Dr. Forrester opened the meeting, his voice was steady, but laced with emotion. Tonight, we address an incident that has shaken our community. You will see the facts. We will respond as neighbors, not just bystanders. Then he gave the floor to Noah, who had brought the footage. A collective gasp rose as the events played out on the screen. There was no ambiguity. There were no technicalities. Just cold, clear cruelty. Sylvia's lawyer tried to object, shouting that the footage was inadmissible, but Forrester shut him down. This isn't a courtroom. This is our home, and we will decide what kind of community we want to be. When I stood to speak, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't shaky. I had spent years in courtrooms, arguing for voiceless creatures, tearing through corporate lies, and standing toe-to-toe with giants. But this time, it wasn't a corporation I was confronting. It was a neighbor. And it was personal. I told them about Ava, about how the loss of her father had nearly broken her, about how Daisy had helped bring her back to life, about how Sylvia's act wasn't just cruel, it was targeted. It was calculated. You didn't just kill a dog, Mrs. Pratt, I said. You wounded a child, and you did it because you didn't like the laws I fight for. You used your power to punish my family. That is not leadership. That is abuse. I turned to the board. I am here tonight to request that you remove Sylvia Pratt from her position immediately. Her actions violate community ethics, state laws, and the most basic sense of human decency. Then the unexpected happened. From the back of the room, an elderly woman stood with the help of a cane. Her name was Margaret Reardon. She cleared her throat and said, 10 years ago my cat disappeared. A week later, I found her collar in Sylvia's garden shed. I said nothing out of fear, but I'm done being afraid. The room fell silent. Then another neighbor stood, and another. Stories poured out. Suspicious incidents, lost pets, strange behavior. The picture painted itself. Sylvia hadn't snapped. This wasn't a one-time outburst. This was a pattern. And now it had come into the light. When the vote was called, it wasn't even close. 27 votes in favor of immediate removal. Only 3, her staunchest allies, voted to keep her. As the meeting adjourned, dozens of neighbors approached me. Some offered meals. Others offered names of service dog trainers. For the first time since we moved in, Meadowstone felt like a community. Over the next few weeks, things moved quickly. Sylvia was arrested, charged, and arraigned. I filed a civil lawsuit, not only against her but also against Pratt Naturals, citing the retaliatory nature of her actions and the long-standing connection to Dermalux. As the case gathered momentum, more media outlets picked it up. What began as a local tragedy soon became a national conversation about animal rights, service dog protections, and disability justice. Ava's therapist visited daily, helping her process the trauma. We created a small memorial garden in the backyard, complete with forget-me-nots and a stone marker bearing Daisy's name. She would never be forgotten. 3 months after that terrible day, Dr. Forrester called. My sister's training center just received a new litter, There's a golden retriever puppy who seems special. Would Ava like to visit? We drove out that weekend. The moment Ava rolled into the facility, the smallest of the puppies broke from the pack and ran straight to her wheelchair. She placed her paws gently on Ava's lap and stared up with wide, soulful eyes. Her name is Ember, the trainer said, but she doesn't usually behave like this. Ava's hand reached out slowly. She smiled, not a forced smile, a real one. Can she be mine? She asked quietly. Yes, I said, tears brimming. We'll start the process today. 6 months later, everything had changed. Sylvia and her husband sold their house and left the community. Dr. Forrester took over as HOA president and introduced sweeping reforms: clear disability accommodation policies, service animal protections, and a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. The Daisy Memorial Fund raised enough to sponsor 5 service dog pairings for children with disabilities. Volunteers from the neighborhood helped train, fundraise, and spread awareness. What had once been a rigid, cold, rules-first neighborhood had transformed into something new, something good. A year after Daisy's death, we held a community event to celebrate the first round of service dog placements. Ava stood proudly, Ember by her side, demonstrating commands for a new child and his puppy. Her confidence was back. Her laughter had returned. And as I watched her in that moment, I knew we had made it through the worst storm of our lives. That night, as I tucked her into bed, Ava turned to me and asked, "Do you think people can really change?" I paused before answering. "Yes," I said, "when they choose to, and when they face what they've done." She nodded, stroking Ember's fur. "I hope Mrs. Pratt learns to be kind someday. I think Daisy would like that." I kissed her forehead and whispered, "So do I." And as Ember lifted her head and met my gaze with those familiar, intelligent eyes, I felt it deep in my bones. Daisy had never truly left us. Her legacy had become something bigger than pain. It had become purpose. And that purpose would live on.